174 Halacha Mem 174. We were mentioning yesterday a few different options. If a person made a blessing on the first talit and they wanted to wear a second talit, so we said there are three different ways to make a blessing. One is the way where I have in mind all the talitot that I'm going to wear after this are included in my first blessing. The second guy says, no, I only have in mind for the first blessing, for the first talit, I'm specifically excluding any other talit. And then we had the third guy, he was like the Parav guy. He didn't think really much about whether yes or no was going to include. He just said a blessing. Today we have a slightly different scenario. Im haya bedato, if it was in a person's intention, lilbosh shtei talitot, to wear two articles of clothing that have four corners. Bezo achazo, one after the next. Vachar shebirech al harishona, and after he made a blessing on the first one, he wrapped himself in it, he took it off. So you come to the Knesset, you put on a talit, you make a blessing, you wear it, then you take it off. Why? Because you saw a nicer talit you wanted to wear. This one had a stain on it. You didn't like where the wrinkles were, you didn't like what color the stripes were. For whatever reason, you took it off and wore a different talit. And afterwards you come to wear et hashniya, the second one. So do you have to make a blessing on the second talit or not? You're switching talitot. Basically, you made a blessing on one talit and you're switching it out with a different talit.
I say yes because you're preferring it. So it's almost like you're saying I don't really agree that the first one was good enough. So now I need this.
You switched to the stain.
Yeah, for whatever reason. I gave an example of a stain.
Yes, you say it again because that's a different garment. It's a different talit.
So we said, remember on top of 168, we read the Maran, and the Ramah says that if you wore one, and then you took it off and put on a second one, you have to go back and make a blessing.
Oh,
that's what the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Ishlish, the Ramah says, that if you wore one talit, and then you replaced it with a second talit, you have to make a new blessing. That was on top of 168. Remember that, Maran, we did it? That was the Ramah.
Also, I mean, if you say with a talit without the other one in mind, and you have to do it again, I mean, that's you've got to do it again if you change it.
Well, the question is, did the second one have a blessing made on it? Does the first blessing count for the second talit?
No, it's not.
well, it depends if you had in mind the other ones or not.
Oh,
You intended to bless them all.
Well, there you go. You can say, I'm going to put this talit on, and I'm going to have in mind I'm going to change it and put another one on. So I'll say one bracha and come about.
Then that
doesn't
works,
work
yeah.
that way. No,
Frankly,
it can't work
I don't think we'll know until Mashiach comes.
Says Rabbi
And
David
what do you have to say?
Yosef,
We'll change it again.
Afal Piken, even though you are wearing a different talit, you don't go back and make a blessing on the second one.
Oh, wow.
So he disagrees with the Ramah.
It depends.
We have to see why he disagrees with the Ramah.
Let's see why.
Let me see what I can pull out of my head. The reason he disagrees is because many rabbis disagree with the Ramah. The question is why. Aruch Shulchan, I have that book here. Mishnah Berurah, I also have the Mishnah Berurah. Let's see what it is.
It's a good answer. It depends.
Eli, that's what you have to offer me?
Maybe when you come into the synagogue, you should have in mind that if you see anyone with a better talit,
There
you made a more expensive one.
I like the one with the silver bells on it
Silver.
and the golden pomegranates.
Somebody will put like an extra row on the silver, and then the next year add another row. And the Yemenite brides had all those really super decorated.
The Ramah says something very interesting. Another Ramah. The Mishnah Berurah says this is not similar to what Maran writes, that taking it off is a hefsek, is an interruption, and therefore you have to make another blessing. Rather, here he had in mind, when he was making the blessing, that he was going to change his talit. It doesn't say that anywhere. I don't understand where he picked this up from. What I'll tell you right now is the following. The majority of the Chawonim, especially the Ashkenazi ones, the Alter Rebbe of Lubavitch, the Aruch Shulchan Rabbi Epstein, the Mishnah Berurah, the Chavetz Chaim, the Magen Avraham, a lot of them argue with the Ramah and say you don't make a blessing. So probably the formula would be, when you're in doubt as to when to make a blessing, you don't make a blessing. A lot of rabbis that disagree with the Ramah. There's a big argument, but probably now is a good place to say it. We Sfaradim follow Maran, Rabbi Yosef Karo and Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah is the commentary of the Ashkenazim in Shulchan Aruch, but there are dozens of other Ashkenazi commentaries in Shulchan Aruch. The question is as follows: is when Maran doesn't say what he means. He doesn't talk about a scenario that the Ramah brings up. Is the Ramah any different than any other Ashkenazi rabbi? I mean, is he just another Ashkenazi rabbi that his opinion happened to make its way onto the Shulchan Aruch, or do we treat him with more severity, more weight than anybody else? Interestingly enough, the Ashkenazi rabbis say he's the same as anybody else.
Wow.
And the Sephardic rabbis say no, he gives a heavy weight more than anyone else. According to that logic, I would tell you that in my heart, if the Ramah here, I can't tell you about Maran, I don't know what enough there. But for someone who follows the Ramah, I would say the Ramah is correct here. That you didn't have in mind for this. Now, why all the other rabbis argue, we have to look into their arguments. But the Ramah is a heavy weight. It's not for nothing that the Ramah was chosen from all the rabbis who wrote a commentary, that his commentary should be on the Shulchan Aruch. Clearly in HaShamayim, they wanted him to be the foremost authoritative psak or posek on the Shulchan Aruch more than anyone else. So when I see Ramah, I don't always agree with the Ramah because I have to follow Rabbi Yosef Karo. But in other situations, I prefer him over anybody else. So let's leave it at that there's an argument here between everyone else's interpretation of this halakha and the Ramah's interpretation. Let's ask you a better question. What if Eli comes to Beit Knesset and he pulls out his talit over there and he makes the blessing? And David shows up and says, No, I got a nicer talit for you. And he takes away Eli's talit and he gives it to him. Do you have to make a new blessing or can you just wrap yourself up in that second one?
New blessing.
Why?
Because I didn't use it.
But you didn't use up that blessing yet. You said it, you didn't use it yet.
Oh, I didn't use
We
it.
never got a chance to wrap.
Yeah, he didn't wrap himself up in the first one. He's holding his talit and David is so...
Lightning Dave grabbed
It comes, grabs him and gives him a different talit. Or let's give you a more realistic scenario. Imagine you couldn't find your talit. And it said use one of the shul's talitot. But David, he knew where your talit was, so he got it for you. But you already made a blessing on the shul's talit. So he quickly pulls it out of your hand and gives you yours.
I found it.
No, I already made it.
You already made a blessing. So would you have to make a second blessing?
No.
Why not?
I think you do still.
Why?
Because before we discussed if you did one and then you had to change it because of a stain and you're going to put another one, you said it. So if you're going to have one, even though you said it.
But in that scenario, he already wore the first one.
Okay, so what's got to do with wearing or not wearing? You said that...
Because here, you're making a blessing on a talit.
But you're holding
You
it
didn't
in
use
your
up the blessing yet.
You wore it. You wore it in front of you.
That's not wearing, that's holding.
Okay.
You prepped it.
You had the intention to wear it.
Yeah, you had the
Right, but
identity
you didn't
in mind.
wear it.
Yeah.
But you didn't. But you had the intention.
I have the intention every week to go on a diet, but it doesn't work out for me. So what happens? It doesn't mean that it works. So let's look inside. Im lakach talit biyado. If he takes a talit in his hands, ubirech alein, he makes a blessing berkat lihitatef b'tzitzit. He makes the blessing of to wrap myself in my tzitzit. V'kodem shitatef b'talit, and before he had a chance to wrap himself up in his talit, ba chavero, his friend shows up, v'lakcha mimenu, and he takes it away from him. V'natan lo talit acheret, and he gives him a different talit. Kedei shitatef ba, in order to wrap himself in it. Lo yatsa yedei chova bevichato harishona. He did not fulfill his obligation with the first blessing. It didn't count. V'tzarich lechazor ulevarech al talit hashniya. And he must go and make a new blessing on the second talit. So, David is victorious in this round.
You would make a blessing immediately.
The question is why? Why is that right? Because when he made the first blessing, what did he have in mind? He was going to wrap himself up in
In that one.
that one.
That was
In
the
that
intent.
one.
Yeah.
And he didn't. She has to make a new blessing.
You're right.
Ta-da.
I don't always want to be right.
He has to make you blessing because the action was not completed.
Yeah.
The blessing meant to you that time. I
So
didn't
then it
think
is the same as the first one when you say a blessing on the first one, and then you try to change it. You're going to do this because it was on that one.
Seems like the Ramah is right in this case. So why was he not right in the previous case? Here's an interesting question. This question I'll bring to you from Baghdad. We know that according to the Zohar, the proper thing to do in the morning is to come with your talit to the Beit Knesset. So you put on your talit at home, and you come to the Beit Knesset. In many places, such as Baghdad, it was very dangerous to walk around the streets wearing a talit. It was bad enough that you were Jewish, you didn't want to be openly Jewish. Do we know how the Baghdadi Jews dressed? You ever seen it before?
They said they would wear it and then wear clothes over it. I remember.
Okay, do you know the gold robe that I wear?
Yeah.
It's a Baghdadi rabbi robe. They wear such a robe, and because it's gold, they never wanted the people around them to be jealous. There's an ugly, I can't tell you ugly, an ugly brown coat that goes on top of it. It's like a, I can't tell you what kind of color it is.
Sackcloth, muddy.
Yeah, like a mud. It looks like mud. It's
Mud
a
color.
long,
Okay.
and it just covers up the entire robe. It's thin, but it's meant to conceal things. So they would have a very thin talit that they would wear underneath that brown coat, but on top of the gold robe, and they would cover it. So that way, when they walked to Beit Knesset, nobody would see it. When they would come to the Beit Knesset, they would switch out of that talit into the new talit that they had waiting for them in the Beit Knesset. The question is, if you made a blessing on the first talit, knowing that you're coming to the Beit Knesset to make a blessing, you had in mind, I have in mind that when I go to Beit Knesset, I'm going to wear a second talit.
Yeah.
Do you make a blessing on that second talit?
No.
Why?
Because we studied before that if you got up in the morning and put your talit on and had in mind that you were going to put on another one, you didn't have to say it again.
There was a condition to that rule. Do you remember the
I don't
condition?
remember the condition.
David's right. That was the rule. If you have in mind to wear 2, 3, 4 talitot, so long as you had it in mind, one blessing works for all of them.
Oh, was it that it was there with you?
Yeah, why? Why was that the condition?
And you weren't taking off the first one.
Right, Barry's right, but I'm not going to use that as the condition.
You mean the condition was that you had to have the other one in your possession at the same time?
There was a reason for that. Let's read it together. Im lavash talit achat beveito. If you wear one talit in your home, uverach aleha kodem shitbeshena, and then you make a blessing on it before you wear it. V'chiven liftor beverchato talit nosefet, and you had in mind that it should include the other talit, shebedato lilbosh bebet knesset, that you have in mind to wear at the bet knesset.
then you don't have to,
Well, we want to know, do you make a blessing on that or not?
if you have it in mind, you don't have to make it.
Oh, that's what you said. David was trying to say the same thing, and many of you were.
Condition, though.
Dat Maran HaShulchan Aruch, the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Karo, she'af al piken, that even though you had it in mind, tzarich lachazor levarech, you must make a blessing al hatalit, on the talit shelovesh bevet knesset, that you wear in the Bet Knesset. Why?
Because people will see you're not making blessings.
Because of that, you're going to make a blessing? Kevan, because we said that the condition was that you're not allowed to make an interruption between the first talit and the second talit. Kevan shehahalicha mibeito lebet knesset, because the walk from your house to the synagogue, the chshevet, is considered lehefsek, an interruption between the first talit and the second talit. That which we mentioned, that you don't have to make a blessing on the second talit, is when you're putting on both of them at home or at the shul, or they're both around at the same time. But now you have to walk from one place to another place to put on that talit. That's considered an interruption.
So if David takes off, pulls out of his arms the first talit, and gives the second one, is that considered an interruption? But that's different.
Well, there
because
we
he
were
didn't
talking
wear
about,
it.
what did you have in mind? Here you have in mind the second talit, but it doesn't help that you
Are
have it
these
in
the
mind.
kind of questions you get asked in your examinations as you go through the yeshiva?
Not about these.
I mean, is this like when you have to go graduate, they ask you this kind of stuff and you have to remember all this?
Do you want to answer that question?
Open book.
When you go take tests, you take tests on specific matters, the same kind of nitty-gritty details, nitpicking, on the laws of kashrut, and the laws of Shabbat, and the laws of family purity. So you take like a year on this, 6 months on that, 3 months on this, but yeah, you have to know whatever they're going to throw your way. Today they have like quick smichas. It's like, I don't know, they do them in their... By us, I'll tell you, Rabbi Peretz, I was very grateful to Rabbi Peretz, is that he's not... My other rabbis that I studied from were very into memorization, memorizing things, facts, details. Rabbi Peretz was much more practical. And so he would never ask you questions that were irrelevant. So very often if there was a scenario where it would never happen, he would just skip it. He wouldn't even read it. Or what he would tell you is, he would ask you a question, he would see you know what you're talking about, he said, don't tell me by heart. I don't need to know if you know by heart. Go bring me the book that has the answer to the question. And read it to me. But it says, practically as a rabbi, in 20 years from now, you're not going to remember every detail. I have to know that you know not only where to look, but that you'll never answer a question without looking it up first. And so that's how we were trained. But then again, Rabbi Peretz didn't do what most rabbis do. Today, most rabbis, they study like kashrut for 18 months, and they'll take a written test on it with like 100 questions. And by us, every section of Shulchan Aruch, you take about 5 or 6 tests on it. So for example, in the laws of kashrut, we easily took 100 tests. Oral tests, 10, 15 minutes each, but like on 15-minute test orally on 2 paragraphs. A lot of stuff to go about. Yeah, that's what you do. You split hairs. Part of it is to try to figure out how halakha thinks, how to work through things. Very often you'll get a question, here's the question. And then what you'll be asked is, what's biblical, what's rabbinic, what's a custom, what would you tell a Sephardic person, what would you tell an Ashkenazi person, what would you tell a person who's having a hard time with observance, those kind of questions. Very like, what would you paskin in this scenario? Answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a big but here. The but is, we pretend, Sfaradim, that we always follow Rabbi Yosef Karo. It's not true. I do, mostly. But not always do the Sfaradim, and here you're going to see the big but. Ulam, but, Rabim miraboteinu hacharonim. Many of our later rabbinic authorities cholkim bazel divrei Maran Shulchan Aruch. They argue on this matter with Rabbi Yosef Karo. The Sovrim, and they hold shehalicha, that the walking mi beito levet knesset, from his home to the bet knesset, eina nechshevet lehefsek, is not considered an interruption. When is it considered an interruption? Only if he, in his mind, he lost his concentration, lost his focus. But the actual walking is not a problem. So many rabbis argue with Maran on this halakha. V'yesh lachush l'divrehem. Says Rabbi David Yosef that it's his opinion that you should take their words into consideration. It's a big rule in our hands. That when you're in doubt as to when to make a blessing, you don't make the blessing. V'afilu, on page 176, neged horaot Maran Shulchan Aruch, and we follow this rule even against Maran, Rabbi Yosef Karo, on the Shulchan Aruch.
So now it's not the walking that we broke up the interruption, it was the mental capacity of losing focus.
Very good. Very good.
So, ADHD people are doomed.
I asked you Mechila, by the way, because remember this paper that I said I should go back onto page 169 and read the Shulchan Aruch? I took it out from my book today, so we skipped the Shulchan Aruch at page 169. What we'll do is we'll pause here for tonight. One more sentence. And even more so, you wore the talit in one room. When you have in mind that I put on talit in my bedroom and I walk to the dining room. Yeah? In that situation, you wouldn't have to go back and make a blessing, because that's not enough of a walking to be considered interruption.
But walking is not the issue, apparently.
According to Rabbi Yosef Karo, it is.
But this was all written before the iPhone.
Where people get distracted.
On the way going.
Now, listen, it could be Rabbi Yosef Karo's ruling is very simple. He doesn't believe you're going to walk from your house to the shul and not meet somebody or see something or notice a car or see a horse, a stoplight, a tree, a flower. You're not going to be thinking about the talit the whole way there. And his assumption is the person will get distracted. It could be that, so they're not arguing about whether it's the walking or the focused, but they both know that.
Most people don't put the talis on. Go home and walk over there.
Most people don't, but those who would, this would be the problem. So God willing, we'll start again on page 169 with the Shulchan Aruch.
Is it paragraph 13 of this?
Yes, that's the 13 we have to start with next time. So someone could remind me to please do.
We haven't started 13.
We did the halachot of 13, but I forgot to read the Shulchan Aruch to you.